This video provides information about how to adapt your sequences that you may have purchased from a vendor to your Pixelite controller. Now the key to this is understanding how the addressing works within Pixel controllers. Now let's go over some of the basics to start with. First, you should have already done a hardware test. In the Pixelite controller, that is done by pressing and holding the factory IP address button on the controller for 3 seconds. This will then cause the controller to go into a default output mode, making sure that all of your lights connected to the outputs are working. Assuming that's working, we would then progress up to using Xlights 2012B to test them. This will also help you, Xlights that is, understand the addressing. So let's do some also basic work on the networking. So from our other videos, we've set up this particular IP address on my PC. In this particular case, we are connected directly to the PC. I've got an IP address of 192.168.0.49. The default IP address of the Pixelite controllers is 192.168.0.50. So this means that I have a different address, and that's fine. So once I've got that configured, we've also mentioned in the past, it's a good idea to do a ping. So I'll ping 192.168.0.50. 50 is our controller, and you can see that I reached the controller. So unless you can do all these, don't proceed further with trying to configure anything else in LOR or anywhere else. Figure out where your networking problem is and then proceed from there. Okay, in this particular case, we've got our network configured correctly, and again, that is covered in other videos. We're going to go ahead and launch the assistant utility. So we launch the utility, we click search under network devices, and you can see my controller comes up and its IP address is 0.50 here. We're going to go ahead, double click on the settings. We're going to walk through these tabs just for confirmation. Now in this particular case, we've got the default IP address. This is using DHCP. That means that if there is an IP address provided by your network, let's say for example by your Linksys switch or your local network router, it might be different, so be aware of that. You can set static IP addresses here. This is where we're going to set the settings for the Pixelite controller and the channels. Now also you should have at this point also have already configured the Pixel IC. Now for Pixels purchased from Holiday Coro, in almost all cases they will be WS2811 or 2812. And as you can see, we've selected that here. Now if you have a strip or pixel string with non-RGB ordering, which is normal, you may need to change that. So if you ever get a string where green is showing up and it should be red, you may need to reorder that. And then on miscellaneous tab, we just have the update firmware and the name of this controller. So assuming this is all set up, let's go back to the control tab here, and this is where all of the address within the controller matters. So let's start off with some basics. First is a universe. A universe is a collection of channels, and that number of channels is 512 channels. So there can be 512 DMX channels in one universe. Now the upside is there can be unlimited universes practically. So we can put as many channels or as few channels in each universe as we want, and we can configure the Pixelite controller to do that. We can also make universes span across multiple outputs, and we'll show that. Now, if you're from the LOR world, the more equivalent ordering might be for a universe to be the controller or output controller. Now, the channel would be the individual channel within there. So for example, you might have an LOR controller 9, and then you'll have outputs 1 through 16. So the DMX channels are the equivalent of the 1 through 16, and the controller address is the equivalent of the universe. So let's look at some of these settings. Now there is a default within here, and it says start universe, start channel, and it will set up the automatic number of pixels required. But we're going to go ahead and click off this check for advanced and go into advanced, and here we have a default configuration for a pre-assembled controller from Holiday Coro. Now we are not implying that this is always the right setting for your particular need. The sequences you purchase will dictate this. So there is no standard for any addressing with any sequence. So you either, one, may need to adjust the settings on the controller to match the sequence, or you may need to adjust the sequence to match the controller settings. And we're going to walk through those different options. Now, first let's understand what we're looking at here. If we look at the output in the far left column here, you can see their outputs 1 through 16. And these, of course, correspond with the physical outputs on the controller. In this particular case, we're working with a PixLite 16, which has 16 physical outputs. And in this particular case, we would have, as this is our default assembled controller, we're just going to assume that we have RGB strips connected to each one of these. Now, these strips, in this particular case, are 30 LEDs per meter, 10 ICs per meter. So the number that matters here is 10 ICs. 10 ICs means 10 pixels. So, if you have a 5 meter strip, and because it's 10 ICs or 10 pixels per meter, you take 10 times the number of meters. Now you end up with 50 because we have a 5 meter strip by default. So, we have 50 pixels on output 1. Now 50 pixels is comprised of 3 channels, or 3 DMX channels. One for red, one for green, one for blue, for each pixel. So that means we have 150 DMX channels. Okay, so now that we understand what's physically hooked up to output 1, now let's look at these individual settings. So the first thing we have here is Start Universe. This is where we can set the beginning. So the controller will automatically address up from the point that we specify in the Start Universe. You'll notice that it only has Start Channel and Start Universe. There is no End. The controller will automatically calculate how many addresses it needs to use. So, for example, if we set up here Start Channel 1, Start Universe 1, with the number of pixels is 50, what will happen is the controller will automatically assign DMX channels 1 through 150, again, pixels, this number of pixels will be channels times 3. So it'll be 50 times 3 would be 150. So internally in the controller, it's going to actually have 1 through 150 channels. Now, again, we don't specify the end channel. Now, what we can then do is go to the second one and say, okay, 1 through 151 channels. So we'll go back up here and put channel 1, and we'll put 50 pixels. So you can see here that output 2 will still be universe 1. So instead of having one universe for each individual output, which seems probably a little more logical and simple to use, some sequences need to, or some controllers have limits designed within them that don't allow them to use so many universes at ease, or they may have the limit to the number of channels. So you may have to roll these channels from one output to another in a single universe. So we're going to say here, again, we're going to do 1. So if we start at 150, that means we're going to go 151 through 300. So that means the next one is going to be 301, and it's going to be 50 also. And so we can keep doing this all the way through our settings. Now, how do we know exactly how many pixels need to be on each output? Well, I'm configuring, in this particular case, the controller to work with a given sequence. And we're going to go over and open up a sequence in just a moment. And we will be adjusting the controller to fit that sequence. So, this is basically how you do this. Now, if we wanted to do it the other way around, we could set the settings the way we want to set them, and then go into the sequence and change it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click OK. The settings on the controller will go ahead and be configured. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to Lightorama Sequence Editor here. And the sequence editor, let me get that here. There we go. The sequence editor will pull it up, and we're going to open up one of the sequences. In this particular case, this is God Bless the USA, and it's provided by holidaysequences.com, and we're going to go ahead and load that into Lightorama. So we're going to go ahead and go open. We're going to go to the sequence. We're going to open it. Now, you also, in most cases, just for reference here, may need to go to Media File. Then you need to go to the location of the file and specify the file. Because if you try to play the sequence, it won't work without the media file. So your media file may be located in a different place. So let's just look at what we've got in this sequence. So we can see in this sequence we have a singing Christmas tree, and we can see all of these individual singing Christmas trees. There are 4 singing Christmas trees. They each have 8 channels. And then we have a star. We have 2 additional undefined units. And then what we have here are the ribbons. In this particular case, you can see they're grouped in groups of 3. So you have 1 through 3, 4 through 6, 7 through 9, 10 through 12. So this sequence is designed for a 12-strip tree. Now, does that mean you could use it on a 16-strip tree? Absolutely. You may need to adjust the sequences so it gets in the right place on your tree. So let's just look at the individual channels in here. Now, the easiest way is to actually go into here under Tools, then go to Channel Configuration, and this allows us to see the channels and the way that they're configured very easily. Now you're going to see the device type here and the type of network. Now, device type here is specified elsewhere. So let's back up just a moment and go to Edit, Preferences, then we're going to go to Network Preferences. Under Network Preferences, we set our outputs. Now, LOR has to be told how it's going to communicate with different devices. Now, LOR can talk to multiple networks, and in this particular case, this sequence does have multiple networks. It has a DMX universe, or universes, and it also has LOR networks here. So, you may need to set up a particular port here if you're using LOR, and you can run your LOR network in parallel at the same time with your E1.31 controller. And in this particular case, we've also got a universe. Now, in this particular case, we can see universe 1 is configured already, and it's not configured for the right address. So in our particular case, we need to set that for 0.50. Now, again, if you have modified your IP addressing on your controller, change this to the appropriate setting for your controller. Now, remember, each one of these universes is one individual output. So, here, we may need to set up multiple outputs here. In this particular case, we're going to go ahead and say this. So, again, you're going to need to set up as many of these as you have, and we'll show you how to find out how many you have. So we're going to set up 4 universes, which is required in this particular sequence. Okay, so what we're doing is we're telling it that universe 1, 2, 3, and 4 for DMX, again, we're on the DMX tab, are all on the E1.31 controller at this IP address and this port number. Now this port number is a standard port number, and in most cases, you're going to go ahead and just leave this the same. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. Now, it mentions you may need to restart, and that is true. You may need to restart your sequencer for this to work, because you can play these sequences. If you go into view, play, you can play the sequence by going to start and making sure that your control lights is checked off. You can actually play the sequence. Okay, so let's go back in here to channel configuration now. So now we know we have some outputs. We have an LOR network, which is the regular network. You can see the unit and circuit number. That's the LOR format. So again, unit is the equivalent of DMX universe. Circuit is the equivalent of DMX channels. So these are LOR controllers, and you can see that they're specified as the device type LOR. Now, when we get down past these first 2 units right here, we see that we have the ribbon. Now, these are the CCRs. Now, these CCRs are set up red, green, blue. You can see red, green, blue, 1, red, green, blue. It's number 1.1.2. And you can see that they're all set up on universe 1, but then they're in cascading sequential order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what this means is that if we have a set of strips and the output is to DMX universe 1, which if we go back over here to our utility, we open it up, here we can see that we have 50 pixels right here, one full strip of 5 meters of 30 LEDs, 10 ICs per meter, we're going to have one strip on this output. So if you look here and we go back and we scroll down, we have 50 pixels, right? So you see here, we're going down. So if you keep scrolling down, right here, see where it says ribbon 1 in? That's because we're right here. See? 150. So the last pixels are 48, 148, 149, 150, and that is the end of this pixel strip. So now, on the second ribbon, we're going to still be on universe 1, but start on circuit or DMX channel 151. So if we go back to the utility again, let's just look and see how that maps over. So see here, output 2, second strip or ribbon, and it starts on 151, and we're going to have 50. So again, we're going to end on 300. So if we go back to the sequence and we scroll down here, and you can see here, we're scrolling down, we get down to 300. You're going to see the end of the second ribbon. See, ribbon 2, 300, and we're at DMX address 300, and we start over. Now, the question is where are we going to break? Because the next iteration is 300 plus 150. Now we're at 450. So let's scroll down to 450. All right, so here we are at 150. You can see that it ends here. Ribbon 3 in. Ribbon 4 is now in a separate universe. And this is why in this particular case, this sequence has been broken down into ribbons 1 through 3, 4 through 6. Because what they're doing is they're using only 450 DMX channels of the total 512. Then on the second universe, they're configuring the next DMX universe of 2 with start address 1. So let's go ahead and go over to our tool again and configure it to work that way. So again, we start at 301, we went to 450, so this is going to be 301 to 450. Now we need to start with a new universe. So we're going to start with 2, then we're going to go 1, and it's going to be 50. And we're just going to reproduce the same thing. 2, 151, 50. 2, 301, 50. Now, we would just keep doing this all the way down, or if we click OK, or we can uncheck this advance. We can say start universe 1, start channel 1, pixels per string, and you can go to 50. Now, this can produce some unpredictable results. For example, here you'll see that, oops, I click OK. The controller is going to restart. Now, this is going to produce some unpredictable results. This is why you probably want to go into advanced. So you may be tempted to just go ahead and say, oh, 50 per output. And it will, in fact, do that properly for the first output. So let's go back here, advanced. In this particular case, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't click off advanced. So if we do 50 pixels per ching, and we click advanced, and we click OK, and we go into advanced, you're going to see that you get some odd numbering. See how output number 4 is 151? It's literally using up every single channel and then just rolling over. We don't want that. So again, I recommend not setting these, going to advanced, and then setting them manually. So we're going to go again to output 2, and it's going to be 1, 151, 301. Then we're going to start over again at the next grouping, 3, 1, 151, 301, output 4. It's going to be universe 4, 1, 4, 151, and 4, 301. And you can just leave this something else. So for example, here we'll just put universe 3. We're going to put channel 1, 1, 1, 1, 14, 1, I'm sorry, 15, 16, just to use these channels up. So now, Your settings on your controller may vary. For example, it is not uncommon for you to split the output. So for example, you may have outputs, if you have a 12-string tree, on outputs 1 through 6. But then on 7 you won't have it. If on 7 you don't have any outputs, you may need to start over again here and start with 3 here. So for example, you may have something like this. This is not to be too confusing here, but what we're going to do is we're going to go to 3, and then we're going to go DMX channel start 1, 3, 151, 3, 300, 301. Then we're going to start at 4. It's going to be 1, 4, 151, and 4, and 301. So in this particular case, we are skipping outputs 7 and 8, and 15 and 16 because this particular setup is just 12 outputs. But if we had 16, we would just go continuously through. So again, you need to match your physical outputs to the logical outputs. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. Click OK. So again, back here, we're back at Universe 2. Universe 2 is going to start at 1. So on the 4th ribbon, Universe 2. Looking again, back at this, if we're on output 4, what do we have? Universe 2, DMX channel 1. In this particular case, the sequence is designed for 50 pixels. So that jives perfectly with what we've got here. Ribbon 4, which is, of course, in our hardware, output 4, Universe 2, 1. And of course, go down here, we go down to channel 150. There we go. Ribbon 4 in, 150. Again, we start at Universe 2, 151, and pick up from there. And this goes all the way down to the very bottom, Ribbon 12. And you can see we're at Universe 4. So if we look here, Universe 4, 301 through 450 is going to be output 14. In this particular case, this would be physical ribbon 12. So how you set these up is completely up to you. This is the method that I've just shown you that allows you to map your controller to work with your sequence. Now, there may be cases where you wish to do it the other way around. For example, you may want to address your controller in the way that we put it in, which is allowing you to say one output per universe. So you have Universe 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you just use them that way because it's much easier to keep track of that. Universe 1, output 1, Universe 2, output 2. The Pixelite controller is advanced and allows you to do that. Some other controllers do not allow for that. You can adjust these sequences. So for example, if we wish to do that, it's a little bit laborious. You'll need to go in here and you'll need to adjust these sequences. So for example, if we wanted the second strip here to work on Universe 2, what we would do is we'd go in here. Whoops, I'm sorry, got past that. So we need to go to 150. So right here, normally we would roll the channels to 150. In this particular case, if we wanted to do ribbon 2 on Universe 2 and starting at DMX channel 1, you can do that. Universe 2, DMX channel 2. Universe 2, DMX channel 3. Universe 2, DMX channel 4, and so on. Now, in this particular case, we would be doing it the other way around. We're trying to make the sequence adapt to our physical output. So, this is how you can adapt sequences to work with the Pixel controller. Now, again, as I reiterated, or as I mentioned at the beginning, I reiterate again, sequences almost always need to be modified. There is no standard for addressing within sequences for Pixel controllers. So you'll either need to adapt the settings on your Pixel controller or adapt the setting, or in some combinations you may need to actually, if you're mixing multiple sequences together or using sequences from different vendors, you may need to do a combination of both. Pick one standard that works best for you. So, of course, if you have any questions, you can always contact us at holidayquoro.com/contact us. And if you have any other questions, let us know.